Project Healing Waters is a nonprofit organization that assists in the healing of America's veterans through the therapeutic art of fly fishing. Their programs remove isolation and build community. Through fly fishing, fly tying, and rod building, veterans experience nature's healing power while gaining resilience and a sense of belonging. They serve active duty military and veterans of all eras through chapters nationwide. If you are a veteran or service member ready to heal, or if you want to support this mission, visit projecthealingwaters.org today. Find your local chapter or make a donation to help more veterans get on the water. Project Healing Waters, restoring lives, one cast at a time.
I don't want to derail us. I mean, you guys had a good conversation going. I had to hit record so we can capture it. But just for like a recap, we're just getting us all back on here to talk about the A-10 for sure. And then Joel, I know you were talking about Vietnam before, and if we maybe hit on that a little bit, but please, you guys continue. We're talking about the feasibility and the fact that they're trying to get rid of the A-10. And to Conan's point, like we've all been talking about, it's not that we're so loyal to the A-10 itself, but as we've said a million times before, and everybody else has said it too, you can't just take something away without replacing it with something comparable, at least. I mean, you can, like we were talking about before, the F-35 can do some of the missions that a Hog can do, but then it's like, I got it, but like Conan was saying, he can also wash windows if he tries to figure it out, but he's not going to be the best at it. So anyway, yeah, please go ahead. Let's talk about it. One little thing I wanted to say though is I got a feeling that the Air Force as a whole, or at least, you know how the leadership changes however so often, and they all have their agendas and they all want to push their certain things. I believe that they're trying to get away from the A-10 because it's not something they want to do. They're not. I don't think it's undeniable that it can be used. But I just think that's not their thing. I think they're like, well, it won't last in a near peer fight. I'm like, well, shoot, let's get rid of tanks then, or let's get rid of A-64s, or let's get rid of anything else that won't survive in a near peer fight. Also, I mean, there are things that can survive in the air against a 5th-gen enemy, and there's things that can't. I mean, that doesn't mean you get rid of everything. Joel, I think you were talking about that earlier. It's just so frustrating that they're like, well, that doesn't fit into our plan for a near peer fight. I'm like, well, eventually, like we all say, and we said it before we got on here, I'm just kind of piggybacking on what you guys said. It's eventually going to come down to a guy shooting at another guy, and you're going to need that cast to protect you.
Just to follow a point that Joel made just before you hit record. So, audience, sorry.
Yeah, please.
That point. Now, we were talking about how, and JD, I really like your point. Why is it that of all the weapon systems you just rattled off, that really could be argued as unsuitable for a peer-to-peer fight, why is the only one that really is getting the axe, the A-10, which represents a mission the Air Force has historically, whether it was the bomber barons or the fighter mafia? They didn't want to do that, so they've been trying to kill it before it was operational. So, but back to the point Joel was alluding to. This is, we're mixing and matching our history lessons, and one of the history lessons I think that is preoccupying a lot of people's thinking is we've had what's it now been 30 years of a rapid air campaign that quickly erodes their air defense system, and then we can more or less operate as we want. Well, that's not going to be a peer-to-peer fight. We're going to spend weeks, months, maybe even years trying to get to the point where we can operate freely in the air. Now, that, of course, is going to have to some degree, precede any effort. And here's a point again that was made earlier. Any sort of peer-to-peer fight is not going to be like the Iran fight today, where everything's going on in the air. There are no boots on the ground. A peer-to-peer war, if it's serious at all, is going to be in preparation to lead to some sort of ground operation. So you can't say that the next war is going to be an unpermissive environment and then not say that it's going to eventually become a force-on-force fight. All right, the one goes with the other, and so with that being the case, I've made it before. I guess maybe in our email conversations, we need to remember that the air to ground operation concept that has been dominant now for some 80 years in America's war fighting, NATO's war fighting, took shape in 1942 in North Africa and Sicily and Italy. Did we have freedom in the air? Absolutely not. Right. So, we need to re-examine this notion that air to ground warfare is only viable when we can do whatever we want in the air in the air. Therefore, we can do whatever we want on the ground. That's just not historical.
Yeah, it's frustrating when they're like, well, it doesn't fit this perfect image I have of what it's going to look like when we fight this near peer fight. It's like, dude, it's combat. The best plans always go to shit as soon as you hit the ground. It's just so frustrating. It's like, you don't, like, to your point, Steve, you can do CAS anywhere as long as you have air superiority in that area. I mean, you don't have to have air superiority in the whole theater.
Yes.
You just have to have it where you are. And it's frustrating that these people are so myopic and so black and white. Like, nope, if it's a near peer fight, it's got to have these assets and these guys are out. And it's like, come on, dude.
And to your point, JD, just very quick, what they are thinking is war unfolds linearly. Again, back to 1942, we were fighting for air superiority while we were carving out islands, moments of temporary ability to operate in the air to bring in CAS. And so the idea that we're going to have freedom of access in the air before we can even think about bringing in ground forces and bringing in air to ground warfare that will be effective. Well, that's a very linear understanding of warfare.
Yeah. Hey, real quick. Sorry, Joel, I knew we were getting ready to talk. As you can see, Eric Brandenburg just joined us. I don't think anybody here has ever met him because he is now Dr. Brandenburg. So we have so many doctors in this group. I want to get a physical. That's how much I'm getting, it's awesome. I can't believe it. We're so smart. We are so, our brains are so huge.
Dr. Higgins, this is Dr. Brandenburg. Dr. Brandenburg, this is Dr. Call. Dr. Higgins, this is.
I know. I thought I was on Spies Like Us. Doctor. Anywho, Brandy, thanks for joining up. We were just talking about the A-10 and the typical. It's a mistake to get rid of it without having some sort of suitable substitute to fill in for it. And kind of giving our reasonings behind that. What do you, Joel? You were going to say something, and then Brandy. Can you come in after Joel? Sure. After Joel says what he's going to say?
Yeah, this might grease skids here for you too. So, okay, I mean, I guess 2 points. One kind of in response and follow up. I think that, to Steve, what you were saying here too. I think what we're kind of describing is this paradigm that we're constantly against when we're thinking about how to plan for the next conflict is, planning for the war that you would prefer to fight versus planning for the one that you're actually probably going to fight, right? So, obviously we plan for the former and not the latter, right? Because we want to direct as much as we can control the scenario, we want to direct it towards the fight that we want to fight. And we know that we can, take the fight to the enemy at a fairly low cost in human capital if we do things predominantly through air power. So our whole planning mechanism, our whole way of thinking seems to be geared towards that, where the moment that you get into a land fight, now the cost is so much higher, the risk is so much higher. You're not just risking a couple pilots and some platforms, you're risking, an entire land contingent. And not to say that one is more valuable than the other, right? But just to say that I think, we tend to want to avoid the thought of getting to that level before we've pummeled the enemy into the ground, right? So I think it's, to some extent, this feels like a little bit of a matter of convenience. And then the other point that I really wanted to make, and this isn't necessarily to say anything on the devil's advocate kind of side of things, but more, I think, just to kind of grease the skids for the conversation in a little bit of a different direction too, is that I think that the argument that we don't want to do CAS because we don't necessarily have air superiority. I mean, we're all in agreement. It seems like that's an inconvenient and an ill-conceived argument. But at the same time, I would say that the premise behind it isn't so much about superiority and air superiority as much as it is kind of an economy of force type thing, right? If we're trying to spread the Air Force so thin and we've got to, pick and select all these different platforms that we want to have all of these niche capabilities to do, we're going to pick platforms that are primarily designed to do multi-role type things, which the A-10 doesn't necessarily fit that in the same extent that something like the F-35 does, right? It's not necessarily as pliable as some other legacy platforms that we want to keep around. Now, I don't think that's an argument that also has some holes, right? Because I think you can make the same argument about bomber platforms and so on and so forth, right? That there are some other niche capabilities that are not necessarily multi-role platforms. But I think that, at the core of it, that seems to be another element of this argument, is that we don't want to have a platform that isn't necessarily good in all circumstances, and we can't spread it to a litany of different scenarios where we can then, subsequently gain an advantage in a bunch of different areas, right? The A-10 is too narrowly restrictive to one particular type of warfare. And that, if we're trying to plan for future conflict, honestly feels a bit inconvenient, right? I'm not advocating for that position, but I think that is a part of the argument itself too.
Joel, I know, Brandy, you were going to go, but I got to answer this while we're on the subject, or we'll never come back, right? Robert Frost, way leads on to way. You're 100% correct that the A-10 is inadequate for that kind of evolution. Threat requirements change, right? This speaks to what we talked about before we started tonight. Where I'm talking about what are the capabilities we're looking for in that air-to-ground fight. If we're talking about with close proximities to friendly forces, specifically avoiding the CAS title, right? Because maybe we want to change that. Maybe we want to try to get away from just what people think of as CAS, as wheeling up overhead, and that's not realistic. The reality is the capabilities for the mission set are going to remain the same. It's whether or not the Air Force is going to prioritize that mission set as a focus, or if it's going to, continue to be as you stated, as we're under budget constraints, we're trying to optimize value. We're going to have these multi-role fighters, which are capable of a lot of different things and not really very good at any one of them. Right? Yep. The F-35 is not what I would consider a great air-to-air fighter. Neither is it great at air-to-ground, but it's multi-role.
Yeah, I think.
Good for you.
I think what the current generation forgets is the way we were raised as JTACs. We were raised to do CAS not in air superiority. It was all high threat CAS. And
absolutely was and it's high threat.
So it goes back to training to that standard. You're not going to have air superiority. So the fact that they're basing what the A-10 can and can't do on it. So when this fight initially came up, was it like 2010, 2011? I went with Keyball up to Congress to brief, and then ended up briefing the Secretary of Air Force, Chief of Staff of the Air Force, and the SecDef on keeping the A-10, and we got that can kicked down the road a little bit. But let's take the A-10 out of it. If it needs to retire, then retire it. But our fight was you've got to replace it with something that has the same capabilities.
Right. And you can't replace it until you have that capability fully tested, vetted, and crews are trained and doctrine is approved that aligns with how it's supposed to be employed. And I'm glad you brought this up, right? Because when we were in the Cold War, we were absolutely training for a near peer fight, right? And so early to mid 90s, the Cold War is technically over. Put that in air quotes if you want. But what are we still training to? The war we just, prepped for, right, Steve? Further to your point, it's not the one that we may be fighting. We saw that, with Afghanistan and Iraq. It was completely different, and I think in some respects, tactics, techniques, and procedures as they adapted to the particular environment, they kind of got lax. And so, there's a reason, well, there's many reasons why we used grease pencils and acetate. Part of that is because tablets didn't exist, but also because if we're in a near peer environment, it's not unreasonable to think that they also have the capability to jam communications, to jam GPS, to render us essentially effectively in that area, back to the days of the Gutenberg Bible, right? We're rudimentarily communicating with the written word and, not back to the Stone Age. That's what I'm talking about. But what are you going to do? I got to pass you something. I got to write it down. We're going to get back to that. Well, that's the same thing that we're talking about now, but we had a plan for it then, and see, people had forgotten. And this is what we're all been talking about in these conversations. It's that institutional knowledge that gets kind of lost in a generation because nobody talks about it.
Right. Brandy, you alluded to it. You started, they every 10, 15, 20 years, it's like a cycle, man. And when I was an airman, you guys probably experienced this too. They were, things would happen and the old guys would be like, yep, I saw this 20 years ago. And it just keeps happening because of what you said, Conan. These guys that get in these leadership positions don't listen to anybody, and they're like, I think I can make it work this time. It's like, no, man, I'm not saying don't try it a different way or don't, do something different, but listen to people who have been there and done that. We're not just, saying it for our health.
The CAS aspect of air to ground is probably the least sexy way for the Air Force to demonstrate it's amazing.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, we have great videos of things in Afghanistan and Iraq, set to Disturbed or somebody else, and it's just rocking out and let the bodies hit the floor. But the reality is, it's an institutional thing, I think, right? The Air Force wants to be fly high, and that's missiles, that's Space Force, that's sexy, F-22 and Gen 5 fighters. That's not some clunky bathtub with a big gun, hanging out in your backyard for 2 to 3 hours.
But you brought up a good point, though, Conan. You alluded to the Cold War. That thing was developed for the Cold War. It was developed to kill tanks during the Cold War, during a near-peer fight. Now all of a sudden we're like, well, this is a near-peer fight. We can't have an A-10. I'm like, well, that's where it came from. That's where it started. We weren't fighting in Iraq and at that time, I don't know.
That's what I'm talking about. Steve, I want to hear your thoughts on this too, because you've said it before, but it's that loss of knowledge. We saw it from World War II to forward every conflict.
And Eric, I'm really glad that you brought up the generational thing. When I first started my military history studies, okay, and this was back well into the Cold War. One of the things that we talked about, why America had so much problems, this was well before 9/11, so Afghanistan and Iraq were, not even a glimmer in somebody's eye. But why America had so much trouble adapting to Korea and Vietnam is the generation or several generations before that had seen America fighting what you might call crusade wars, the Civil War, World War I, and World War II. And so when Douglas MacArthur says there is no substitute for victory, there are a lot of people who had been raised on stories that we fight to total victory. There's nothing else, right? Okay. There has been a huge generational shift in that now there's several generations that have grown up with limited wars that now seem normal. And I think it's hard for a lot of people who, born after a certain era to think of America fighting at what we know a peer-to-peer war would end up looking like, and maybe that's part of our problem. We need to start accepting the fact that war is not, and I'm not saying that Afghanistan and Iraq and whatever's happening in Iran right now isn't ugly, and maybe even going to get uglier. But right now, at least, nothing has approached World War II. Which is probably the closest approximation to what we have if we ever get ourselves in a true peer versus peer war, right?
We're relearning the lessons that at least most people on here that understood, we were trained to a standard that I don't think that they understand. So we just Billy Otter came in, JD, and we went down to got with Dax and did a tour of the 17th, and you got to hear all the great things they're doing now. Everything they're into, and they're all doing this great stuff. But again, it goes back to it's all a bunch of technology based, and it's just a different mindset from the way we were raised. And when I had the same conversation with Dax while we're there about how they're going to fight Iran. He brought up the fact of the air to ground threats. And I joke with him. I'm like, well, we trained through that in the 90s. Like we, bringing the aircraft up in the pop they roll over, take a look at it, and you bring them in. Like the A-10s trained to a standard of flying 50 foot off the deck to stay below everything, and they would pop up and attack the target. We'd have to help them do the routes from the air to ground threats. Like all that was plotted. And he looked at me like he had no idea what I was talking about. I'm like yeah,
that's cosmic to them, man. You're gonna fly an A-10 in there with a threat? It's like, yeah, man. He does terrain masking, and he goes through valleys, and it's what they do.
They always give you surface to air threats that you had to get the aircraft in and out of. And you had IPs, and it was just it's just crazy. Everybody now thinks CAS is a stack, and yes, you can. As long as you control the skies, you can stack as many as you want. But when you don't, you got to go back to old school, and you got to get them in, get them out.
Well, that's kind of what we were talking about before. I mean, before you got on here and before we even recorded, like you can have an air superiority-ish situation in a little bitty area of your overall area of operation. I mean, you don't have to control everything. You just have to set the conditions so you can get a guy in there, and maybe it is, high threat and he's down low and, he's got a pop, but you can still get him in there. It's not impossible. It just seems like, the Chinese have Gen 5 and we can't, it's like, well, all right, man. They have this high-speed surface to air missile. We can't do anything about it. It's like, come on, man. There's always something you can do. I don't know. It just seems like, and to my point before, it seems like your kid, giving you excuses why he doesn't want to go to bed. It's like, well, it's not Gen 5, so but it's like, well, whatever, dude, man, you can figure it out. I mean, it seems weak.
Well, and one of the things that has, I guess, maybe not been really brought into this, they're kind of thinking about this. Most of the time, anything we do is not just a two-ship going in and doing this. It's part of a package that is put together to establish, some electronic dominance, some jamming and so forth. So this idea of seizing a temporary air freedom, I won't call it superiority, but air freedom, limited, ability to maneuver over a given space at a given time is going to be done with a package cracking open that can to allow the air to ground stuff to come in and bring timely support to the guys.
Right.
Can I jump in here too? And I'll make a pitch. I don't know if any of you have ever read Carl Bilder's Masks of War. Anyone familiar with that? Yeah. Yes. So like classic book, right? And I mean, as a good grad student, I have to make a good book pitch, right? So here you go. So I mean, he's describing, he's an individual that works for RAND, writes a book here about kind of the culture of all the different military services, for those of you that are not familiar with it, or for anyone that's listening in. There you go. It's perfect. It's an oldie, but it's a goldie.
I'm trying out new techniques, guys, so bear with me. I've never done this before.
Gating, you're the man.
I'm glad to give you the opportunity here. So I mean, he, in this book right here, he's talking a lot about the culture of the Air Force versus the culture of the Army versus the Navy. And I think probably better than most texts that I've read, establishes kind of a mindset or a way of thinking that really dominates a particular service. And so, for the Air Force, or, the subject, that we're discussing at present here, a huge element of this is that, he terms it kind of worshiping at the altar of technology, which I think is probably apropos, right? For, I think a lot of what we're discussing here in terms of how we start to examine solutions to really complex problems. We want to throw trons at it. We want to throw, all kinds of beepy squeaky tech at it. Really, probably what it needs is a 155, but that's it. But nonetheless, we start looking for these really aggressive technological solutions, as opposed to just kind of getting in there and getting the work done, right? So when we're talking about kind of like old school seed, and just suppressing the threat, or giving him an enhanced target description and bringing the aircraft in and mitigating the threat, we start to looking for something that's far more elaborate as a result. And so I think part of this sort of trends us down the road of being a bit of an ahistorical organization. It's not this like willful forgetting of the old way of doing business. It's just the problem is that the old way of doing business doesn't actually line up with our mindset of how air warfare should really be done. And that involves tons of technology. And generally speaking, doesn't even, it also means a high degree of independence, right? That the Air Force should be able to do everything on its own, and so that tracks us towards these really elaborate solutions as opposed to something that might be actually quite a bit more practical.
I mean, Joel, I wanted to touch on that, right? So, I mean, it's great you brought up Builder's the Masks of War, but it's an institutional tension, right? Let's expand this past the Air Force. I think you could argue since the Air Force became independent in 1947, right? There's been a tension between air and ground perspectives on, the proper employment of air power, right? This is where, going back to Carl Builder, airmen, let's put that, with a capital A, they view close air support as wasteful dispersion of air power for tactical and not strategic ends, right? While the ground commanders, they view it as essential fire support that the Air Force has historically neglected. So it goes to the point I made earlier about let's make this an actual focus. When we talk about air-to-air, everyone would argue every day and twice on Sunday that that's clearly a mission set that the Air Force has, is air-to-air, right? Not a particular aircraft, not a platform, the Air Force. So why does the Air Force not have air to ground as a true focused mission set? And I'm talking SCAR, I'm talking CAS, I'm talking battlefield air interdiction, talking deep interdiction. It's more like, well, we can do that with this thing, and that's great, but I can throw a Frisbee with my left hand. It doesn't mean I'm good at it.
Yeah. There was to bring sort of a deeper historical perspective, going back to the interwar period and right on up through World War II. The mantra was, why go after the individual tank, i.e. close air support? Why not go after the marshalling yard where all the tanks are being mobilized? Or even better yet, let's go after the factory that makes the tanks. And that kind of thinking, the most efficient use of air power, well, I really find, people using the word efficient when I want to jump in and say, what about effective?
Right.
And when we have our guys huddled in foxholes, they don't want to hear efficient. They want to hear effective.
It almost seems like the Air Force is stuck in that way. They're like, well, it's a surface-to-air missile. I got to take it out from the air with a harm or whatever. They have these very limited views on how to take it out. When you could, like you said, Steve, you could find out who the battalion is that's running that battery, or who the people are that are actually manning those batteries. And mess with them, take their, disrupt their lives so they can't even go to work. There's so many different ways to skin the cat, but we're so focused on that one way. It's just it's so frustrating.
And I don't want to make it sound like it isn't obviously taking out the factory that makes the tanks has a elegancy all its own. But again, when we're talking about, well, we can either take out the factory, or we can help these guys huddled in a foxhole. What really at that moment should be our focus?
Mm-hmm.
Let's not necessarily go down that road of what's the order of battle, so to speak. At some point, you've got to take out the individual tank, right? I mean, if you blow up all the factories and they can't make anymore, at least this is how I would wage war. I wouldn't build my tanks and just leave them in the yard. I would deploy them. I would let the troops train on them. They would not be co-located. And so the point is, okay, where are they? And if they're in the marshalling yards, great, smoke them there. And if they're not, where are they? And if they're in close proximity to friendly forces, I'm using those words specifically, there is detailed integration that needs to be done for that air-to-ground fight. And if we haven't institutionally focused on that, if we haven't made a commitment to a platform that can do that well, to training crews, because an aircraft is only as good as the crew that flies it, if we haven't invested in training the guy on the ground, and whatever you want to call him, you want to call him Papa Smurf, you want to still call him a JTAC, whatever that guy is, if we haven't institutionally dedicated the mission set to train that guy to have realistic ability for the fight, then it's not a priority. And they just need to come out and tell the taxpayer, like, this is a risk we're willing to take. We'll try to smoke them with standoff weapons, but, good luck to Jimmy. No, they're never going to say that. So they need to get serious behind the focusing on the mission set, right? Regardless of the aircraft itself, that doesn't matter. But the things the capability. Well, look, if I want to punch you in the face, it still requires getting punched in the face. I'm not going to talk to you about it. I'm not going to kick you in the face because that's different, right? Well, the same thing. If it's gas, if it's air to ground, if it's close proximity to friendlies, there is something that benefits the abilities of an aircraft that has a long loiter time, that has survivability in a place where they're going to get shot at, that has multiple weapon systems that it can employ, that has robust and redundant communications so they can talk to multiple parties at the same time while the guy on the ground is busy not getting perforated. And these are capabilities that need to be addressed. And so, again, we talked in the last one about the A-10 not being retired. And, Brandy, you mentioned it, right? But okay, if it's obsolete, retire it. I'm in agreement. I'm not married to the A-10. What I'm married to is something that the guy on the ground, Steve, when it goes from, we've smoked all the factories, we've smoked all the marshalling areas, but, that battalion from the 101st just ran into 30 tanks that made it out of both of those. And what are we going to do then? And you got to have a plan, right? Because otherwise you're going to get your lunch eaten.
There's another point, and JD, I want to bring in another point. Maybe I don't know what your plan is, so maybe I'm derailing it. But
no plan.
Nate, Nate
usual.
Bashan, for those who don't know who we're referring to, Nate and Conan and I were in another podcast with another podcaster, Scott Kelly, at the Water's Edge, and Nate said something that as soon as he said it, it was like, exactly. The Air Force, and to a significant extent, the Army, has come to see air-to-ground warfare as defensive, CAS, right? Mm-hmm. And then we went on to talk about a number of historical examples where offensive air-to-ground. How do you think Patton raced across northern France? There was a lawnmower of offensive air-to-ground P-47s. And really, that's where probably the golden age of the TACP was helping the Army armor commanders at the company and battalion level coordinate that. I keep calling it the air-ground dilemma. The German tanks are trying to hide from the P-47s because the P-47s just eating their lunch, and so then the Army ground commander comes in with his tanks and picks them off in detail. So then they consolidate and maneuver to meet the Army ground threat, and then we bring in the P-47s again. This is offensive air power at its finest. And I'll throw it in because Nate isn't here, but he tells the story of the German division commander, who his division was destroyed, and he had to surrender. He refused to surrender to Patton. He said, "I want to surrender to the general who beat me," and that was O.P. Wayland, the commander of the 19th Tactical Air Force. And that again. That is the TACP operational concept at its finest.
Steve, I mean, you're right. Right on the money. I mean, it's the air superiority and the strategic strike assets that capture the institutional attention and the budget share.
Yeah.
But the reality is, it's the ability to deliver kinetic effects in support of those ground forces that ultimately determines whether territory is taken, held, or lost. And in that instance or example that you just gave, I mean, the only reason that Patton was able to move as effectively and as quickly as possible, or as he did, is because he faced a much weaker opponent who had been decimated by air power. And that's that air to ground fight.
And he commanded, he sat atop a absolutely amazingly integrated air and ground. Hammer and anvil, which is more important? I don't care. He had them both, and he could depend on both.
Let's fast forward to 2003 and Thunder Run with the guys from Kuwait straight up to the middle of Iraq doing the same thing. It was all prepping the battlefield in front of them so they can just roll straight through. Similar thing. Again, I'm just total agreement with you guys. I've never been married, and I've been told the chief of staff of that. I was like, we're not married to the A-10, but until you got something to replace it, don't get rid of it. Like that's stupid. The analogy that I gave at the press conference, I don't think it's on YouTube anymore because it was a great drinking game. Because I didn't know I was going to be there to speak. I was there with a bunch of senators, and they just told me, "Hey, we're going to turn the mic over to you." So I wrote down some bullet points, and every time I say "on," you got to take a shot in this. But the analogy I gave is basically, saying that we need LeBron James or pick Michael Jordan at his heyday. It's like, hey. Michael Jordan needs to retire because LeBron James is 3 years old. And we're like, what are we going to do till he's ready to go in?
Yeah.
Like it's
right.
It doesn't make any sense. And that's what they're missing here is they always look at us old JTACs as you guys just love the A-10. And that's the argument I got from the Secretary of the Air Force. I'm like, no, we love the capability. Like you're making the whole point. Like, right. Set the airframe aside. We need that capability until you can replace that capability with the same capability and make it stealth, make it do whatever, but make it stay around, 2 or 3 hours over the battlefield, make it have an air to ground gun, not an air to air gun, and have it the same capabilities. Then once that's been proven and it's flying around and it's proved itself on missions, retire the A-10 all you want. But until you have something to retire it with, don't do it. Like we don't know if 3-year-old LeBron's even going to take up basketball.
Right. And like I pulled this up, and something we always leave out, and I think it's ultimately important, is the survivability. I mean, how many stories have you heard of an A-10 just getting its ass kicked and still making it back to the field, and the pilot's fine, and it was because of the sheer durability of the aircraft. Like you can throw a bunch of OA-1s at something, or you can throw a drone at it or whatever. But if it only can take one hit, or it can't take any damage at all, I mean, what good is it? I mean, these guys, these A-10s stay on station no matter what until they absolutely have to go home. They're flying by, their hydraulics are gone. They're manhandling this friggin' tub. I mean, that's what people forget. It's like this thing has more capabilities than people are giving it credit for. I think they're discounting it, and they're not giving it the credit it's due. I mean, you can see this thing I just pulled up. They're killing things out in the water. They have a increased presence over there. I mean, they do first, and let's forget about this. what's the best CSAR platform out there to run cover for, a down pilot, which we just did. I mean, we just proved that we need these guys to be Sandys out there and do their job. I mean, it just boggles my mind. Like, to Brandy's point, it doesn't need to be an A-10. I don't need this particular aircraft, but give me something that does at least what this thing does. I mean, gee whiz. I mean, it's so versatile, and I don't know. I get adamant about it. It's like, it seems like a no-brainer, but then I don't know. Like I said, they just make excuses because their agenda doesn't fit it. They're like, well, we're moving in a different direction.
CAS is the worst way to show how special air power is, right? And further to the point, Joel, I think you were saying, the Air Force, look at the Balkan War. There was no ground element, moving around that needed support that way, right? There was going to be a completely air campaign. Hey, that was awesome. I'll try it again with less sarcasm later. But earlier we talked about, JD, to your point, the essential characteristics are going to be what they're going to be for this mission set, right? And one of them was that survivability. Great thing about the A-10 is the titanium bathtub, the dual systems. I mean, just ask KC if she appreciates the backup systems to the navigational aids and steerable configuration of the plane, right? But it also has to have that loiter time.
Right.
It's got to be on station for extended periods, right? I mean, that's possibly the most undervalued characteristic in the air-to-ground fight, right? Because ground combat is episodic. It's going to be intense activity, followed by some lulls. Not always, but it can be, right? We got to prepare for what you might see, the worst case scenario, and that would be that, right? Something that can stay overhead for hours. Well, I mean, while the dude on the ground is trying to stay alive, that plane can be communicating back. That plane can be gaining SA. That plane can be, responding to multiple contacts and building genuine situational awareness, right? And this goes further to the point that I made earlier, right? If that plane is only capable of employing one weapon system, probably not useful. So it's got to have weapons capacity, carry a lot in different kinds. It's got to have low speed maneuverability, where, going back to survivability, and Brandy, to your point, 30 years ago when we were training up, it was a fast run-in, right? It was from the OP, it was 50 feet above the deck, and it was popping on final and acquiring the target and taking off out of there. Great. What does that imply? That implies that speed and, an ability to evade detection is important. Well, fine. Let's build advanced electronic warfare systems. Let's put low observability if that's possible, right? As a buddy of mine would say, he's not a planologist, but let's design a plane that meets all these things. It doesn't have to be the A-10. It doesn't have to be a bathtub flying around in the sky with a big gun. It can be something sexy like an F-22 in theory, but the reality is the capabilities are what they are. So, we're going to the low speed maneuverability that I just talked about. Let's talk about the communication systems. We know that as a guy on the ground talking to the guy in the air, if he can relay that because we can't talk right now, man, that's helpful, right?
Yeah.
And redundancy, because again, things get shot out, things fail, right? If they have sensors, targeting pods, electro-optical, infrared sensors, data links, I mean, that's helpful. Right.
You think about an A-10. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, the visual identification of the target is going to remain critical, at least for the near future. But sensor assisted targeting, doesn't that make it more efficient for the guy on the ground and thus more effective? Steve, to your point, the differentiation. If I have to say fewer things on the radio and expose myself or take my focus off of getting shot, I want to do that. And I said this earlier, and I'll foot stomp this. You're going to see it on the test. The crew has to be trained. If the crew is not properly trained, they really can't do the job. And you can pick any job. I'm not qualified to be a diesel mechanic, but I can go turn a wrench. Similarly, the F-35 can carry precision munitions and it can attack ground targets, but those pilots don't have a CAS or a CSAR training requirement. So what happens when there are no A-10s in theater and we've got a CSAR mission? And I, go back to the A-10 only because that's what we have. We'll call it whatever you want. What,
right.
super survivable, long loiter time, multi-weapons capable and carrying a lot of them, low speed maneuverable, redundant comm system with many sensors and good pilots platform do we have out there? And you answer that question, and that's where we go.
Yeah, I want to harp on that part you said about the pilot. Not to say that an A-10 pilot is a better person, anything than another pilot. They're just trained differently. Like, I mean, an A-10 pilot could show up on station and do a call for fire. How many A-10 pilots have you talked to where we're looking at a map and we're like, okay, we're talking about ground maneuver, and they're like, well, have you guys considered this? And they're like doping it out better than the Army guys are doing it. The way these guys are trained, with not only in all the redundancies they have in the aircraft, and they're using binos and they're doing, it's just a different mentality. And if you don't have that mentality or that training, in which the other platforms don't, F-16s, or F-35s, whatever it is, then there's something lacking there, regardless of what airframe it is. If you're not ground oriented or ground focused, I think there's something missing. Not to say those other guys don't care, because I know this dude I work with. His squadron commander was helping Vance on the ground, during Anaconda. So, and they are there to help. They want to help. It's just that they're not trained the same way. So as much as they want to help and they want to get in there and do the job, it's not always the best guy for that job. So,
I'm going to paraphrase Bruce Lee, right? He said, don't be afraid of the guy who knows 1,000 kicks. Be afraid of the guy who can kick you 1,000 times. Right? That's not a direct quote, but you get the sentiment. All these different airframes that we're talking about, where CAS or the air-to-ground fight is one of their additional duties. What is their primary? I don't know. Pick one. It doesn't matter. But they're trying to do all these things. And so if you're trying to learn Russian, Spanish, German, and Japanese, and, you take an hour a day to do each one, good luck. Maybe you're better at languages than I am. Similarly, a plane that has to train in to certification, competency, and currency in all these different things, air to air, air to ground, CSAR, etc. Well, you're probably not going to be as good as a guy who gets up every day, walks outside, straps on the bathtub, and flies around doing one job for 4 hours. You see what I'm saying?
Brandy, did you give me any A-10s on the dam? What was the ratio of? Was it few and far between, or did you get a bunch of them, or was it about even?
Predominantly, they're probably the second day. First day was F-18s, and then the A-10s rolled in. Then that kind of changed everything, because the very first part of it, I had some A-10s because I had to get them to strafe really close, and then. Once it continued on, the AWACS just pushed everything to us. But we had a lot of A-10s on there, and they quickly learn. So I had a stack of about 17 aircraft. Usually, I'd maintain it for about 3 days, and so I would run them in with how much playtime they had left. And the A-10s got smart, so they would check in, tell me they have very little playtime, and then I hear the same dude for like an hour and a half. Like, all right, so they
Meanwhile, he's 2 hours on station. Like, wait a minute,
dude, they check in like, hey, I got 20 minutes, and I'm like, all right. And I knew it was an A-10. I'm like, all right, cool. And then he kept coming in. I'm like, all right, but.
You're like looking at your watch.
So let's talk about bingo, dude. Let's talk about the other row. So because I was so busy, I had a squadron commander check in, and he's a flight lead of 4, and I asked him to do FAC-A for me, and so he backed off, created an IP for me, and he would run them into, and he helped me during the whole thing when the fight was, when we were still shooting and maneuvering. And I needed help to do that, and that's another thing that they're able to do for us too. Is they even get AirFAC qualified, but I pushed him back, and he did FAC-A, and he checked the aircraft in for me, and he pushed them to me. He told me he would tell me everything, so he was quarterbacking for me, and that's just another mission because they're focused on air to ground. That they focus on the JTAC.
Yeah.
You ever use them like to control the stack? Like I a lot of times I just give them the stack. If if a Draco wasn't there and a gunship wasn't there, and I had some A-10s, I was like, man, can you just control the stack while I try to maneuver through this village or whatever it was, Like they're just there, and they can't. And I don't mean to cut you guys off. They can't wait to do it. That's the thing. It's like they're champing at the bit, whatever you call it. They want to get in there and work so bad, and they want to do such a good job that it's like you got to kind of pull them back. Like, hold on, dude, wait a minute. They're so adamant about wanting to take the reins, which is great. I mean, it really relieves the pressure of a guy on the ground for sure.
If you want to,
can I take 30 seconds to walk over and kick this dead horse, right? Everything you guys just talked about, and Brandy, I mean, you alluded to it. I mean, it's 18-hour days, long 3 days, right? I mean, whatever. But how the FAC-A can benefit the guy on the ground speaks to exactly what I said earlier about capabilities. I don't care if it really is an upside down flying bathtub. If that thing, has a super qualified trained pilot who is capable not only assessing situational awareness and striking targets on the ground, but coordinating those multiple aircraft, relaying communications, and providing that critical airborne, and now, because the dude on the ground is busy, command and control for these extended engagements, man, you have to have it. And it just goes to what I was saying earlier about this being a proper mission set focused for the Air Force, and then not, some numbered Air Force somewhere or some unit, some wing gets to do this on a Sunday. I mean, this has to be focus. And
with that kind of focus, we get not only, it's sort of like situational awareness of the bigger picture. The more prepared you are for a major portion of that bigger picture, the more prepared you are to suddenly pull an audible, and now you're doing maritime operations.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of you guys saw this, because I only saw it today in the news. The A-10 has been retrofitted, or they can swap them out, but retrofitted with an air drogue, air refueling system. And why did they do that? Why did they do that? Because the A-10 is working so much with the Navy, and the Navy depends on drogue air refueling systems.
Right.
That it would made it much more convenient for the A-10 to have an air drogue refueling system, so they can take off the standard Air Force air refueling receptacle and slap on a Navy-oriented air drogue probe. And why did they do that?
That's kind of what I was talking about. It just speaks to they can't wait to get in the fight. They're like, what do we got to do? Oh, I'll do anything. I'll shoot a boat. I'll get a Navy drogue. I'll land on a runway in Michigan and take off from a runway. And it's like they're just it's the mentality of the guys that are flying that plane and the survivability anyway.
And because they are so leaning forward with all of these capabilities, that they're able to just quickly audible. Oh. Well, yeah, I can go do maritime operations. It's not that different from what I have just mastered to the nth degree,
Right.
It's that mentality.
I think just to kind of even try and tie a nice bow on some things too. I mean, I think, Conan, your whole point about capabilities here is pretty critical. And I love the fact that we're talking about sort of this aggressive mentality that it takes to do this particular type of warfare really, really well, right? That it's not just anything that any Joe Schmo can jump in and do, but you've got to be really aggressive, really forward thinking, really flexible, really willing to try a variety of different things in order to make this thing work, which really, in my mind, when you combine the layers of capabilities that you need, plus the particular mindset of, really good pilots that are doing this job well, you're talking about a very, very complex, type of operation, right? I mean, this is not something that is, simplistic in nature that we can just sort of patchwork together, which, on the flip side of that, to kind of go back to some historical perspectives that we were referencing earlier, I think that there's been a tendency for the Air Force as a whole to view CAS as sort of an overly simplistic kind of thing that we've gotten by on patchwork close air support systems that we can use a variety of aircraft, and maybe that's because it's been too much coin or whatever. We can blame it on a lot of different things. But I think that there is a tendency to view close air support as inherently complex, that really a GBU-38 from any aircraft is the same as a GBU-38 from an A-10, right? Like, it doesn't matter. The bomb is still the bomb, right? So we've sort of narrowed what close air support means if we're looking at it from that particular perspective, and where I think we're neglecting to pay attention to what you guys are referencing here, the aggressively minded, highly trained pilot in close air support, the suite of capabilities that also need to be integrated into doing this. This is really, really, really complex. And to kind of reference some of the things that we were talking about before, about why the Air Force might be looking to lean away from the A-10 or retire it, or whatever platform, right? Again, I'm in the same boat on that one. But I think it's a variety of these institutional pressures that are really leading us all to make these decisions, right? So you've got the idea that close air support is simple. We've got kind of an independent-minded Air Force. We're always leaning forward and looking for technological solutions. You got all of these different things here that are all sort of speaking one language, at least for people that are there kind of making these decisions about what to do with the A-10, that says, hey, look, this is not necessarily beneficial, right? And this is why we want to get rid of it. And I think that's what's kind of leading them down that path. But at the same time, I mean, I think counter to all of those perspectives is what we're talking about here, right? That no, CAS is not simple. It's very complex. This is why you need detailed integration. This is why you need highly trained individuals on the ground. This is why you need a platform that has a litany of different capabilities, and why it's important in this particular place to have a platform that is singular, that's a single trick pony, right? But that does that single trick really, really, really well, because the job demands it, right? The conditions itself just demand that particular type of platform.
I mean, it's one trick, but the trick is, like, to your point, complex. I mean, it's not, yes, it's a trick, and it's an all-encompassing trick, but there's so many moving pieces, like spinning plates and doing a trapeze, and there's all kinds of things going on at the same time. There's not just like shooting a missile at somebody or whatever. Not to downplay the other thing.
To your point, I think, Joel, sure. The precision guided munitions, especially GPS guided, have enabled various platforms to employ them. And really, that the bomb on target is not the crux of why the Air Force needs to focus. It goes further to your point, to what you said, JD, right? There's going to be a dude on the ground. And here's the target, but it's danger close, and it's right now, and it's moving towards me. That right. GPS guided munition is largely ineffective against that rapidly reacting target that's also being shot at and is zigging and zagging. Right. It's the reason why you said, Joel, you've got to have a very, very trained, well-trained person on the ground, is because you can't put it in the calculator and figure out what the responsibility is for that danger close situation. There needs to be a human in the loop, so to speak. And that guy has to be turning to his ground commander and getting real-time feedback and instruction on what needs to be done, where and when. And, there has to be an aircraft, a platform, something that can move beyond just that precision guided GPS bomb or laser or whatever. When, further to your point, Brandy, about the FAC-A, hey man, I can't talk. I'm a little busy down here. Got it. I got you, brother. Take a deep breath, hide behind a big rock. I got your back, right? And then that dude is on station. While those F-18s, I had them too, and they seem to always be yo-yoing. So I had one on station and one in transit or getting, tanked at the time. Great. Who can keep them in check? Well, if I have the headspace and timing, I'll do it. But otherwise, it has to be some kind of platform with a seriously well-trained air crew, whether that's one or two in the cockpit. I don't care. Put 20 in there. I don't care. Right? Make sure that when it won't be me because I'm way too old and broken, right? But younger, sexier me comes home, right? And can fight and can pay attention to the stuff that's 20 meters away instead of worrying about how long you got, because I got this hack. And no, man, just hang out, be cool. That's what I'm
talking about. We were on a training mission once, and the A-10, the FAC-A was like, hey, and we had like simulated artillery, and he had another 2 ship that he was controlling. He wanted to do all, like, I mean, it's hard enough for us on the ground to like you said, do a time hack. I'm going to do some deconfliction. I'm going to set up an ACA, and he was doing that all in the air. Like he's like, let me do this. I got to practice doing this call for fire and deconflicting this airspace and blah, blah. I'm like, go for it, dude. I mean, that's the kind of guys we're talking about. The guy that, can write it all down on his leg while he's flying a plane. Yeah, it's just, they're just cool, man.
I gotta head off here. We had my granddaughter's birthday. Okay. It was nice to meet. I've heard of everybody. I never got to meet everybody, but I'm sorry I only popped in for a short period of time. I'd love to do this again.
Yeah, we'll have you next time.
Yes, I enjoyed the conversation. I always learn a lot when I sit through all these, and it was a pleasure meeting all you guys. It's been an honor to meet you guys.
Been an honor on my part too.
Likewise, yeah.
We'll see you guys.
All right, brother. See you
again, JD.
Right.
Yeah, man.
Thanks, Eric.
I wanted to, and here to the point where so many people think CAS is easy. Well, let me bring Clausewitz in. I mean, nothing really gets some of these ACSC and War College people. Then someone once joked that they all wander around Leavenworth with a copy of Clausewitz under their arm to give the impression that they've actually read it. But Clausewitz once
I'm brushing
said,
up on it right now.
Yeah. No, cool job, JD. You are the man.
I'm getting nerdy, man. I can't help it.
Clausewitz said, "In war, everything is simple, but the simplest thing is difficult." And here I want to put in a plug for our good friend Ethan Brown. Volume 2 of Visual Friendly's Tally Target hit the streets just a few days ago. Thankfully, I was honored with an advance copy and wrote a blurb for the dust jacket. But
now, JD, he's bragging.
Yeah.
Oh wait, I should be pulling that up too.
Yes. Give him some free advertisement, man.
No. I mean on the internet. No.
I had to buy mine.
Yeah. Joel and I.
Mine's en route.
Did you get one, Joel?
I did not.
No, I didn't. Okay, good. I don't feel like the only fat kid in the corner now.
Well, I will.
You didn't sign yours like mine?
I will tell you, you are going to be amazed. What you're gonna flip flop between. I'm just amazed at what our guys can do, and frustrated as hell because our national political and military leaders just turned this whole thing. As I said in my blurb, if this sounds like Vietnam, nothing changed. Anyway, but the point is Ethan brings out in just really, really riveting detail how much our guys have going on in their heads. And one of the things he says is that you cannot just dump all this on the platoon leader, the company commander, the ground force commander, because he's busy fighting the fight, right? He's got about 59 different things competing for his attention as well. And so you need to be able to process all of this and give him the quick and dirty. Here's what I have available. Here's what I recommend, blah, 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 blah. And he's got it, go. And then he's back to fighting his fight. Not only are TACPs just phenomenal in terms of keeping all these things in their head, but the air-to-ground integration, again, whether it's offensive or defensive, both sides have got so much going on that to integrate them is, I would argue, one of the toughest jobs on the 21st century battlefield. And our guys are the key linchpin in making that happen.
Well, it's like Joel was saying about it being a complex. It's one trick, but it's a complex trick.
Yep.
Yes, it can be super simple. And that's why I feel bad for these. I don't feel bad for them, but like you get these Navy guys, these Army guys that's their 14th additional duty is JTAC.
Yeah.
And they got to know everything else about it. The team guys or whatever they are. And it's like, and yes, if it's simple and it's just a guy checking in and he can wheel up and you just give him a 9-line and he shoots it, that's great. But if it has to be, if they got to get in the weeds and have a complex mission going on, or deconflict airspace, or whatever it is, or have like Brandy had 17 aircraft in the air at once. I mean, if you don't do that on a regular basis, I mean, that can get hairy in a minute.
Well, and that's the thing.
Think about it this way, right? Think about it this way. The MMA, right? Those dudes are that's the sexy type of fighting. These dudes are jiu-jitsu masters and wrestlers, and they're strikers and kickers and all that, right? And I mean, they're tough dudes, and I'm taking nothing away from them. What about those videos where the dudes stand face to face and just slap each other? And I mean, they rock each other, right? Bells are ringing, choirs are singing, and that's, further to your point, who's going to be able to stand there knowing it's coming and take it and dish it out, right? Because how many times have we seen in the MMA, again, I'm not disparaging these dudes, but luck matters there, where they can get caught by something and suddenly they're in an armbar and they're tapping out, even though they completely, on paper and in the gym, they outclass their opponent.
Or the guy throws a haymaker and just happens to hit him right on the button, and the guy goes out like a light.
But those dudes stand and looking each other in the eye and smiling as they're taking the smack to the face. I mean, you got to admire that. I do. Just for like, why would you do that? A, B, good luck, and I hope you can hit harder than that dude.
All right.
I think to the notion that, JD, you're referencing my earlier comment here about CAS being complex. I think I don't know. Everybody's always well intentioned, and I think having a lot of these discussions about where to go, kind of in things in the future. But I think that there's this perception again that CAS it can be an overly simplistic kind of endeavor. It's not necessarily helped. And don't get my comment wrong. I adore JFOs. I think they're a wonderful asset to have around the battlefield. But I mean, herein kind of lies a nice sort of easy low-hanging fruit example of this, right? That if you can train a JFO to read a 9-line, and that subsequently means doing close air support, which really in most cases probably means the aircraft is picking up a lot of the slack, then what is really that hard about it, right? Because that at its core is really just a technical skill, right? There's not a whole lot to it as much as it is, filling out the form in the appropriate way, blasting it over the radio, and then you can kind of call it good. But I think that's really missing, if that's how we treat CAS, there was really missing what it really means to be a good integrator, right? Where there's actually a lot of cultural know-how that has to exist in sort of bridging the gap between two different services and understanding a variety of different capabilities, and not just capabilities, but also mindsets, right? Knowing how the Air Force likes to go to war, knowing how it likes to employ capabilities, knowing its preference for, particular types of munitions, knowing how it likes to disperse its assets, all of those things, right? You have to understand the makeup, the order of battle, if you will, right? All of these different things come into play on how you want to actually integrate it, right? So it's not just a matter of, kicking off a 9-line in a split second, but actually doing a lot more of the sort of the layered thinking about how to bridge the gap between two different services that like to fight wars in completely different fashions, and really being a very significant cultural bridge and translator between those two different people groups, right? Not to draw this example out too much, but you're kind of, you're operating in foreign territory a little bit, speaking somebody else's language, almost as if you're kind of, like a foreign area officer, kind of doing that same thing, right? Embedded within a particular culture, learning how to speak their language, learning all the cultural nuances, and then understanding how to actually develop relationships and make them function a lot better, right? That is hard work. And that takes more than just simply, like a platform up in the air and a radio on the ground to make something work, right? Which, I think, the A-10, right, for better or for worse, is a key component of that system, because it understands, the pilots understand how to bridge those gaps, right? As opposed to just any other, platform that doesn't necessarily have that same degree of training.
Right.
And bridging that gap, to bring it back again to this idea of we need to not just focus on CAS, but focus on air-to-ground integration, because I'll tell you, it's a completely different headspace when you're talking about reactive air-to-ground integration, i.e. CAS, we're on the defensive. We need the cavalry to come in and save the day. But it's a completely different headspace when you are integrating with the ground force commander on how we are going to take the fight to the enemy and drive them or destroy their offensive capability, so that now we're rolling over their hulks and over their broken and beaten bodies. So, that's another. We're not talking enough about, in my mind anyway, we're not talking enough about offensive air-to-ground integration, and I don't even know if anybody else is really talking about Army or larger Air Force.
If I could just jump in on that, right? I mean, we talked earlier about the different air to ground missions, right? And air interdiction or battlefield air interdiction are a couple of them, in addition to close air support. And there was the argument made that CAS is inherently defensive. Great. I would say battlefield air interdiction, where it's near, but it's not in close proximity to that friendly force, would still benefit from a JTAC. And I cite specific experience. In 1995, I was part of, the gosh, now I've said it. I don't remember exactly which battalion, but it was part of 2ID. They were, rotating through NTC, and they came up with this concept of the Battalion Reconnaissance Detachment, the BRD. Right? What was it? It was a LURS at battalion level. Right. So, or I'm sorry, brigade level, and the different battalions based on, order of battle and priority would get the task, the BRD. And so what did it mean? It meant that, at NTC, I had to spend a lot of freezing nights on Chinaman's Hat, but because of where we were placed, further to what you mentioned earlier, Steve, about hitting them in the marshalling areas, we were overlooking the marshalling areas. Right, we're well past any friendly forces, and we were able to pass in real time. Whether you want to call that, strategic reconnaissance, human, I don't care. The end result was an air to ground engagement, and it had to do with a dude on the ground, which goes back to the training, which goes back to what you're saying, Steve, about let's get away from just the strictly CAS aspect of it. It had merit. It was so effective. And granted, this is NTC, right? So take it with a grain of salt. But what we did was so effective, they had to stop and restart the battle. What does that mean? That means that dudes forward who are able to talk back and bring air assets to bear on a target that isn't necessarily in close proximity, but can offensively affect the battle space in furtherance of the ground commander's intent. Ground commander wants to know, is that tank company moving east or west in that pass? Who would know? You're not going to retask a satellite. Maybe we can get a UAS overhead. Maybe we can. Either way, let's say it's a UAS. Doesn't matter. Something's got to strike it. What's it going to be? Is it going to be the UAS? Well, maybe. If it's got enough on board. But my point is that is an air-to-ground fight. As you said, Steve, there's more to it than simply CAS. There's affecting the battle space. There's furthering ground commander's intent that we have to prepare for, or institutionally we'll lose. It's gone. And it's the reason why JTACs have to get out there every year and qualifying, be current in, what is it, 12 per year? I forget now.
It's changed a lot. I don't know. I couldn't even tell you now.
Doesn't matter. Whatever it is. I mean, let's say it's 3,000. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Whatever they got to do, they got to go out and they got to do it every year, because those skills are perishable. Well, same with a pilot. So again, that Sandy FAC or that A-10 pilot, simply because that's the thing that we dedicate to CAS, they're going to be great at it. The F-35 guy who has no training requirement for it, I mean, that's a coin toss. What is it? What's his background? What did he come to? What's his training? How much did he absorb? So it goes to the training piece too. Shouldn't all air crews that engage in an air to ground fight be trained to a standard that allows them not just simply to employ that GPS guided or otherwise precision munition, but to understand the integration required, to understand the ground commander's intent, to understand if I do A, B will happen. I mean, rather than just bomb on coordinate.
Here's an interesting, or at least turning that your point, and it's a very good point. But what about the ground force commander? How current is he in how best to integrate air power into his scheme of maneuver? Because that's, when we're talking about offensive, and obviously it has a role in the defensive use of air to ground, but all right. In visual friendlies, I was particularly struck with several episodes that Ethan talked about where down to the platoon level or the company level, air-to-ground integration in an offensive role meant sending out a group of ground force guys who were going to set the conditions of making the Taliban come out of the woodwork, so that the TACP could be then bring in the air power to exploit the air ground dilemma. The ground force forced our ground force forced the enemy ground force to mass and maneuver, which then highlighted them to our TACP, who brings in air power. And I'm not even going to say that it was air power that did the killing, but between the dynamic between the two. And here's where the platoon leader, the company commander, the battalion commander, all the way up the chain, the ground force commander needs to be as proficient in how to understand what air power brings to his fight and how to integrate them, because it's no easy thing. I wrote about this. First of all, I wrote about it on the division level in Danger Close with the invasion of Iraq. Joel, I think you were mentioning that. I also wrote about it in the large, what you would call tactical fight. Tim Stamey taking the city of Kunduz, perfect example of this air ground dilemma. And now I have Ethan giving a small scale tactical level presentation of this air ground dynamic or air ground dilemma, where at all of these levels, all the way up to the core level, we are using our Army and air integrated maneuvers to either make the enemy come out and mass and maneuver, so air power can just decimate them, or because air power is decimating them, they disperse and hunker down, so that now our ground forces just come in and roll over them, defeating them in detail. So both the sides of this coin, the air, the TACP and the ASOC, or the leaders above the JTAC are knowledgeable of how to best exploit this, and the ground force commander is knowledgeable about how best to exploit this. If we're trying to integrate air and ground, both air and ground need to know how to best exploit this.
I think that is a phenomenal point, Stephen. I mean, probably one that we really neglect, which I think goes back again to emphasize the kind of the role of TACP and the role that they play, right? That it's about, relational kind of collaboration, right? And then that part of the function of your role as a, joint tactical air controller or as a TACP or whatever, right? Whatever you want to term it, is that you have to build the sort of relational capital and the cultural capital, the institutional know-how in order to make this system function, right? And that hinges so much on your role that you also not just operate as a controller, but also as an educator of some kind, to actually try and form feasible concepts within a ground commander's mind about how to employ air power within, a major scheme of maneuver, right? Which, I mean, I know this is not something that we're necessarily talking about, but I do love the fact that, the people that are oftentimes out there are doing that are like junior enlisted airmen, right? I mean, like, what freaking powerhouses are out there, just killing it, right?
Right.
Leading the way about a really complex topic, about a really, really necessary function, and so much hinges on these junior guys.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And again, a nod to Ethan. He really brings that out. I don't think I have ever heard anybody really bring together all that the TACP has to have going on in his brain. The Army comms are coming in on this here. The Air Force comms are coming in on this here, and he's just integrating it all in his headspace. It's just how this is another function of my military history work, is that so many times throughout America's history, people have stood back and said, "Where does America get these guys?" And right up to the 21st century, we are still getting these guys, and people just stand there and marvel. Where do we get guys that are capable of this and motivated? And it's just it just is an amazing story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But a lot of it boils back down to training. Like, I mean, back when we were younger, it took you 3 years to be a JTAC. I mean, it was like you were out in the field, you were going on OP, went to the OP with the experienced guys, you were training. So that stuff was beat into your head. I mean, it was like kind of like second nature when you got to the point where you had to do a JTAC eval. It was already inherently embedded in your mind. I think the problem nowadays with a lot of guys is like they don't have that corporate knowledge. They don't have that background, that foundation to make them,
I mean, one of the things, JD, to your point, I think it's great that they have a pipeline now, right? They come in, drop their civvies, they're into basic, they're into the pipeline, they become TACPs, they get, certified as JTACs before they show up to the unit. And the argument is that, well, then they're more useful. But there is something inherently useful to the airman of going and getting his ass knocked in the dirt. Hey, camo and commo in 10 minutes, right? And you're setting up camo nets, and you're establishing comms, and you're on the jerk 206, and you're doing HF, and you're pulling nights in the talk. I mean, you're hearing a lot of things. It's the difference between a remote worker and a guy who shows up in the office every day. You've got those hallway communications and conversations that a dude who goes through the pipeline doesn't have. Those boring, endless nights in the jock, hearing about the problems that the Army has, doesn't get to be in those meetings with the coordination, doesn't get to really understand the big picture or how those jigsaw puzzles fit together. They're cooks, not chefs. Whereas, back in the day where you didn't get it handed to you, it did take 3 years. Right? I mean, it did take time because you had to go on a cast trip in order to get practice talking in the mic to aircraft. Well, the guys, there's only so many aircraft to go around, and dudes who are certified need currency. Again, I'm just babbling on because this all goes back to what I said before about if this is a mission focus, if this is a priority, then time, energy, efforts, assets, resources are going to be dedicated to training that person to truly understand the job they're trying to do. Yeah,
but that's kind of what I was getting at earlier. I mean, it's like we've been here before. We've been in this situation where they're like, let's draw down. You know what? We don't need these JTACs. We're going to draw them down. Like when I first came in, it was like they couldn't wait to get rid of us. Then they were talking about the A-10 getting rid of A-10s back then. Yep. And then lo and behold, 9/11 kicked off, and then they're like, oh my God, we need JTACs. Let's try to make them as fast as possible. Oh, these guys got to augment these guys because they can't support their entire unit. It's like, it boggles my mind that we keep going through this cycle. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, I don't know. I've said this many times, and people are probably tired of hearing about it, but I just don't understand that.
Well,
Okay, got it. We're focused on this certain fight here, this near peer fight. I got it, but that doesn't mean you just get rid of the other stuff. I mean, you gotta. What do you guys think?
JD, to bring this home, I mean, really make it poignant for what's going on right now. Every single time the Air Force has essentially said we don't need CAS anymore. We can let this all just go to hell. There has been a au courant, the thinking of the day that justifies that way of thinking. 1945. Any future war will be nuclear. Nuclear and CAS are oxymorons, right? So then after Korea, of course, when we had to go through the iteration of reinventing the wheel, 1953, they're saying, well, Korea was an anomaly. Any future war is going to be nuclear. We don't need CAS. So we blew off CAS again. Then comes Vietnam, and we have to reinvent the wheel. At the end of Vietnam, well, all right, Korea was an anomaly. Vietnam was an anomaly. Any future war will be the Cold War, massive peer-on-peer war. And so we de-emphasized CAS. Thankfully, out of Vietnam came the ROMADS, and they kept the corporate memory. But then after that came Desert Storm, and there the excuse was, oh, we've got this. The Air Force doesn't like the term Mike Warden's air campaign, but that's essentially what it was, and they really don't like military historians pointing out that Mike Warden's air campaign was just daylight precision bombing, World War II daylight precision bombing with PGMs. Okay, and so again, we're never going to need CAS. And then comes 9/11. Well, where are we now? The 21st century battle space has so radically changed that we're never going to need CAS.
It's crazy. It happens every time. You skip right to 1991 with Desert Storm, but they're like, hey, this is the Cold War. We're going to fight Russia. Meanwhile, we go to Grenada, we go to Panama, we go, Mogadishu after, Desert Storm. All these little dust-up conflicts, that's the reality. That's what's really going to happen. Like, we're in Iran. We went to Venezuela. I mean, those kind of dust-ups that's what we do. Yes, you can plan till the cows come home that you're going to go fight China or Russia or whoever the hell, but those never come to fruition. We never have those giant land wars because, frankly, and this is my opinion, there's no money in it. There is no mutual benefit to go toe to toe with China or Russia or anybody else who stands a chance against us, and we stand a chance against them, because this is going to be a bloody punch in the face for both of us. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So we control these environments where we, and to your point that you were talking about earlier, Steve, we're no longer in the business of doing whole scale pushing humans out there to be slaughtered. We're like, whoa, we lose one guy and that's a big deal, which is the way it should be. We should be controlling these environments.
Absolutely.
We should be going in with full control, full security, full everything. And then, and that's what we're doing. And so what I'm saying is, those are the things we need JTACs for. We need A-10s to do that kind of stuff. We need the things we're talking about. We don't need the other things, although they try to push them in and, use them in those certain situations. But I don't know. It always boils down to this little dust up or this little, small conflict or whatever it is.
And remember,
I got to jump off. But I we're blocked out for an hour and a half, but I got to go.
You quitter.
I know. I apologize.
Conan,
no, we should probably all get off. We've been on here about an hour and a half. No worries. We're going to wrap up here in a minute anyway. So, but yeah, please, Conan, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it. We'll catch you on the next one.
No, I appreciate it. And, listen, I mean, the whole point of this talk tonight, I think, really was a great, I won't say dress rehearsal, but at least, first cut at what we're talking about. And that is the air to ground mission. How many times have we said we don't need that again, Steve? And we do, JD. And, and I mean, the reality is, okay, great. if we're going to do it, tell me how we do it, because there are a lot of similarities between a Yugo and not even close when you look at them in person, right? Both have four wheels, steering wheel, seats, engines, when you break it down into gross oversimplifications. But when you look at what's a Yugo supposed to do, or Subaru Justy or whatever I tried to say, versus an F-250, which is going to haul stuff. It's going to be, go off road. It's robust. You can drive it into, a cement piling. It probably won't kill you. Whereas that, Yugo, good luck, right? You're dead when you get in there because you're never getting out. You're going to starve to death. My point is
clean you up with a
same thing with CAS, with aircraft, with if we put something that, how much compost can you haul in a Yugo versus an F-250? Similarly, your parking is limited in the parking garage in an F-250 versus a Yugo. Yugo, you can park in the elevator.
Right. There's an old I don't know if it's a joke or an aphorism, but fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Well, for the
I don't think anybody in the Air Force has ever heard that, Steve. Frankly, I don't think that. I don't think that's ever been uttered. I don't think they know what that is. It's crazy, man.
How many times have we been fooled? 45, 53.
Right.
Fool me 17 times, shame on me.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right.
JD, thank you very much for having us on here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man.
Joel, good talking.
I appreciate it.
Yep.
Steve, as always, my pleasure. I'll see you on the next one. Thank you.
And Joel, I just tell you, Nate was at the weekend this last weekend, so I talked with him quite a bit.
Yeah.
JD, I finally got to meet Nate's wife and his baby boy. Very beautiful.
So they are
family.
real.
Oh, they are. Oh, you know what? I will tell you what. I've adopted a new mantra. The TACP community, we're a family of families. We had a big collective dinner on one of those nights, and looking around the table, there were so many kids, from teenage on down to toddlers. And it just really warmed this grandfather's heart. I'll tell you what. And I think that speaks to our community, that we are so grounded that we are not just these really awesome guys in what we bring to the fight, but we then go home and we're dads and husbands, and it's just really, really awesome.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think it's commendable to do that, because it's so easy to not go, just to not be there for the family. It's really, I like to see that kind of stuff, where guys are like, and they're including them instead of being like, all right, I'll see you later. I'm going away for the weekend to, drink my face off. But now it's like, no, let's have like a family event where everybody can enjoy it, and, you still see your buddies.
Well, and I don't know how much you guys are read into the TACP Foundation. Since I retired from my professor gig, I keep joking it's my third career. Just working with the TACP Foundation, working with the TACP community, doing this kind of stuff, fighting the good fight for the TACP vision, and on the side, I also am teaching some adjunct courses. First time since I was teaching at the Air Force Academy that I'm actually employed as a military historian. That's kind of cool.
Nice.
All right. All right.
And but yeah, that's what keeps me from getting in trouble playing in the streets, or vegetating out on the porch in a rocking chair.
Right. Well, speaking of that, Joel, where are you on your educational journey? Like, are you getting close, or where are you on that?
Yeah, almost through year 2 of the doctoral program here up at UW. So I've got a year left, which is basically a year to madly write my dissertation, which I'm, about to start chapter writing, on Monday, right, tomorrow.
Right.
So it's going to be, I think, a whirlwind of a last year, but then hopefully finish off on time. So that's
what's it in? What are you getting your PhD in?
So it's mil history as well.
Oh, great.
Yeah, UW-Madison has a phenomenal military history program. So yeah, so I had an opportunity to come up here. So it's technically is a U.S. North American history, just in terms of a geographical field, but yeah, thematically, I'm looking very much at the U.S. military. So
Nice.
yeah, it's great.
JD, ask him what his dissertation topic is.
Joel, what's your dissertation topic?
I mean, a lot of what we're talking about right now, right? So a huge portion of all my research is really focused on TACPs in Vietnam. So nice. What I was doing and have been doing for the past year is going through and plowing through and doing a bunch of oral histories of Vietnam veterans that were assigned as TACPs, and then doing a lot of the sort of cultural research on the Air Force during that particular period as well. So there's part of the premise behind what I'm looking at is, there's a very, very odd anomaly, right, that happens with TACPs. That's kind of is a strange thing, right? It doesn't, the traditional narrative of people that experience the military doesn't always happen like this, right? Where essentially with the TACP story, you have individuals that were ad hoc applied as sort of a patchwork, Band-Aid to a huge inter-service debate, right? So there's major questions, that people are fighting about at the highest levels about how, and I mean on an international level too, right? About how to apply air power. And, we're fighting about it. We're bickering about it. No one comes up with any solutions that actually have any real lasting impact. And then we fast forward to Vietnam and out of the woodwork comes all these little, junior enlisted airmen, right? That are radio operators, radio maintainers, and they kind of start filling the gap, right? They just start jobbing out there. And some guys hated it. Some guys love it, right? They think it's like the best job that they ever wanted. Ironically enough, a lot of the guys that actually ended up in that position were not drafted. They had received their draft notice and actually enlisted in the Air Force because they didn't want to go to Vietnam and they didn't want to go in the Army. And then they found themselves in Vietnam fighting. Right. So you've got kind of this really odd conglomeration of circumstances. And then, they're in a fight where the Air Force is very haphazardly treating close air support, kind of paying lip service to it, right? So this is a patchwork solution to a huge inter-service debate, and the Air Force sort of casually throws a bunch of these enlisted guys, but then they kick butt, right? They do a phenomenal job. And so much so that close air support becomes kind of, the linchpin of the way that we've been doing war during that period of the conflict. And the Air Force kind of comes out on this, saying, hey, this is a capability that we actually want to maintain, right? So everybody that served in those positions during the Vietnam War, they were coded with special experience identifiers. And then, later when they actually create the 275 career field, they pull all these people that had that experience in Vietnam, and that's what sort of creates the foundation of the career field itself. But what's interesting, though, and I think this is kind of the major argument that I'm looking at with my research is, and then the unique aspect is that you've got these, junior enlisted airmen here that are, the Air Force doesn't know where they are, what they're doing, right? This is them kind of casually throwing bodies at a solution, right? So when the Air Force looks at these guys, they're not saying, here is the elite of the elite, right? This is the tip of the spear. The tip of the spear during this particular period, right, is fighter pilots, right? That's who the Air Force thought of as sort of being the crystal clear, mega elite of the Air Force. So you transition from that to TACPs being the linchpin of a joint way of war, right? I mean, that is wild, right? An ad hoc solution becomes kind of the crux of a new way of doing business. Is a wild narrative, right? And the fact that TACPs they've transitioned from kind of the lower underlings, if you will, and that's not anything against the enlisted guys. That's saying that there was a casual solution, right, to a really complex problem, and now these guys are the elite of the elite, right? I mean, tippity top of the spear, if you will, right? So I mean, it's that switch that I think is particularly fascinating, and that's what I'm really researching, is how that switch happened, why it happened, and all the kind of cultural institutional pressures that allowed that to occur.
Yeah, I mean, you alluded to it earlier. You said something about them translating or being the translator between the two services.
Yeah.
And man, I was just trying to pull what I was doing while you were doing that. Also, I was listening, but I was pulling up Mike Humphrey's episode. He did the exact same thing you're saying. If people want to hear about like a firsthand account of that, go to episode 87. Mike Humphrey talks about it. Like he says stuff like, they're like, oh, you got to go link up with. First of all, he's the 304, which is like a radio maintenance guy. He's not a soldier. He's nothing. I mean, he's an Air Force guy essentially. Just turns wrenches and fixes radios and stuff.
Yep.
They're like, hey, go out and link up with this Army unit. You're gonna control airstrikes for these guys, or do something for them. And he would just have to. They'd go out on their own. They'd go out in the deep and not enemy territory, but like a conflict area, like it was war. The war was going on where they were at, and they'd have to just link up with these Army units out there, by themselves, with all their gear. It's just crazy, dude.
Totally.
And
mind you, sorry, go ahead, Steve.
No, keep in mind, JD, that I think Nate and I keep emphasizing that it was this community that Joel is writing about that became the critical linchpin between Vietnam and Desert Storm as far as keeping alive this TACP operational concept and how to do it and so forth. When I first showed up at the 20th ASOS, there were still guys who were saying, I didn't want to be a TACP. Obviously, they've made the transition, but still, when you think about what an amazing capability was carried forward out of Vietnam, and Joel's talking about the guys who did it, and it's like, wow, what an amazing story.
Yeah, it really is an incredible story. Unexpected, right? An unexpected solution to a really complex problem.
And I would take that one step further, an unexpectable. You can't turn to guys who are involuntarily thrown into a career field, into a combat environment. Like you said, they volunteered thinking this was going to keep them away from combat. And then it ends up throwing them right into the midst of it. If there was a recipe for creating bad attitudes, this is it. And yet, instead, these were the most recent grandfathers of the modern day TACP.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't you say that it was kind of the caliber of person, like, and I'm not discounting anybody like my generation, the generation after mine, whatever it is, but it just seems like no matter what, those guys, no matter how much it sucked, they're like, well, this is, it's my job. I got to do it. And they would just do it to the best of their ability. It's not like, well, this isn't fair. I wasn't, I didn't volunteer for this, and I don't want to do this. They would just do it, even if they hated the job. Like all these guys I interview, they're talking about they didn't want to do it, or they knew guys that didn't want to do it, but they still did it. I mean, it's just amazing.
Well, there is going to be not in the next week, but in the next few weeks. I've been doing some writing. The Air Force Foundation, TACP Foundation leadership has been wanting me to bring some of these stories forward, and the whole idea is heritage. And so the one thing that I alluded to it earlier, I'm bringing out stories going all the way back to the Revolution, Civil War, the World Wars, where, so many guys are to use a more contemporary expression, thrust in a position again, unanticipated, maybe against their will, but the reality is embrace the suck. Right. And they do. And you just stand back, I'm sure that people of their generation, and certainly us later on looking at it, are like, where does America keep finding these guys?
Yeah.
And that's our strength so far.
It really is.
We keep finding these guys. And, Joel is going to be elucidating in great detail guys who could have said, I did not sign up for this, and I'm going to just be a bad attitude until they kick my ass out.
Yeah.
But instead, they became the grandfathers of the modern day TACP.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, to your point, JD, about it being, some of the generational things. I mean, I think, there's probably some. Let's trying to think about how to say this right. I mean, I think we all generationally sort of carry forward aspects of the narrative that we all want to kind of project forward, right? And there's wide variance across any people group or any demographic, But I did find it interesting in talking to a lot of these old veterans. I mean, like the ones that really established the groundwork for TACP to exist over the long haul absolutely had that mentality, right? I mean, generally speaking, these are the kind of folks that are, building log cabins out of pieces of string and a pocket knife, and they're just finding a way to make things work. And I think we're really fascinated by really intricate and out of the box solutions, right? They're just not tied to the traditional way of doing business. And so, what that enabled them to do over the long haul, though, was to say, okay, well, the Air Force hasn't, provided me with the appropriate equipment to train in this particular capacity, but I have some old clothesline at home that I'm now going to turn into an antenna, and I'm going to string it in the backyard. And before you know it, I'm talking across, so it's that kind of mentality, right? This willingness to be really creative, not tied to traditional mechanisms, and this kind of go-getter idea, that says, I'm going to keep working at this until I actually solve this problem, right? That enables this to be a successful endeavor. They're not all like that. In fact, one of the first interviews that I did was a guy who was one of the founders of the career field, Bobby Mack, who has since passed. Wonderful man. Incredible guy. And he was telling me this story about when he was down at Bergstrom Air Force Base, which was kind of a big headquarters for TACP back in the day, and how they had this sort of cultural divide between the people that really loved it and the people that really hated it, because everybody was arbitrarily assigned, right? If you did the duty in Vietnam, now you're stuck with it. So the ones who loved it were the ROMADS, and the ones who hated it were the Mad Rose, right? Was how they kind of nicknamed each other, right? You can clearly see that not everybody loved it, but they break down their community based on who really was willing to embrace the suck and who was not. Right? Yeah, it became important to them.
And JD and Joel too. I mean, Joel, I know you got a lot of free time on your hands. JD, by the way, I can speak to Joel. Just kind of glossed over it, but the Air Force gave me, probably you, the same thing: a year and a half to get a master's degree, and then 3 years to get a PhD. All of my fellow civilian grad students were like, that's impossible. You can't get a master's in a year and a half. Well, I did. You can't possibly get a PhD in 3 years. Well, I did. And so anyway, just want you to understand.
But you guys, that's commendable that you guys got those, or that you're going for a PhD, and that you, Brandy, and Conan. I've contemplated it, but man, I got a 7 and an 8-year-old at home, and I'm just I can't do it. I think if things were different, if I had a little more time, I could, dig into it. But man, I'm just because to your point, the master's degree, I was like, that's it. That was the easiest thing. I thought that was easier than getting a bachelor's degree, frankly. I mean, I don't want to discount it. Maybe mine was just easy or whatever. But then I started looking in this PhD program. I'm like, holy crap, you got to write a bunch of papers and you got to defend it. And I'm like, I was like, well, maybe later.
JD,
but that's you guys, I don't know.
Give yourself a break. All right. Joel and I, this was our Air Force job. Now that went a long way. Obviously, we, like everybody in the military, we were handed an assignment, and we understood that it meant doing more with less or whatever. And we did it. Okay, I'm very proud of the fact that my civilian counterparts were saying it can't be done, and I did it better than many of them. Joel, I'm sure it's the same with you. But the fact that if it's not your job, what's bringing home the bacon, and when you kiss the wife and say I'm off to work today. It's a much different set of circumstances. So give yourself a break. You're not slacking off.
All right, I feel better now.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things that kind of sits out there, you get that master's and you're like, well, what's next?
Yeah.
But then it's like, man, oh man. But like to your point, like it wouldn't do anything for me right now. So it would be almost like a kind of a selfish distraction, I think, if I were to do.
Here's
I mean, we're sitting here acting like I could just smoke it. Maybe I can't do it. I mean, I've never even tried. I'm not exactly
I can't
brain power over here. So
I can't speak to Joel, but I really was amazed. We joked about it. Some of us, because there were Navy guys and Army guys and Marine guys that were there at the Ohio State, and we're like, it really is. It's kind of not fair. We're up against these guys that are like, they roll out of bed at 11 o'clock and they say, I'm just not really feeling it. And they spend the next 3 hours watching The Price is Right. And, obviously we're not wired that way.
right.
We're out of bed at 6:30. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, right.
So it's kind of like, you do feel guilty sometimes that it's like, going up against a one-armed guy and claiming victory or something like that. It's not a fair fight, but
that's a good point. I mean, I've talked about this a lot with guys on here, and this is kind of like a tangent, but it's like people have a hard time when they get out of the military finding purpose. They go, and then now they're out. Now it's like, man, I got to keep going and do it. And it's like, do you though? Do you have to keep that tempo? You don't really have to. I mean, it's good that you did while you're in because it was beneficial to the war effort or wherever you're doing or your job. But now you need to find something that's going to make you happy, I think.
I mean,
when you guys agree.
All right, but JD, I will tell you, I keep telling myself I've got to write the long, extensive, insightful post on LinkedIn because there's a lot of military veterans who are talking about trying to make the transition, and one of the things that some get it and some don't is we came from an intensive service-oriented, mission-oriented, purpose-oriented. You've heard the stories of the guys who retire and then 2 months later they're dead of a heart attack.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Most of us, I can't speak for everybody, but when I retired, I needed purpose. I needed a mission. Thankfully, I found it. I became a college professor, and I really felt like I was still in service in some very critical ways. And so that was my bridge. But I've heard too many accounts, especially on LinkedIn, of veterans who find themselves in a nameless, faceless cubicle where nobody in their organization appreciates the leadership and management skills that they have, and so they end up just trying to keep the inbox empty, and there's no purpose to it, and they're wondering why they're feeling like, well, I think this is one of our suicide issues, right?
Yeah,
many people not realizing they need a purpose. So anyway, and if it's any added incentive, I've already I've sent one to Conan and I've sent one to Nate. Graduation gifts upon achieving their PhD. Joel, I've already committed. He'll get his when we have this. At least some of us have this inside joke. One of the catchphrases is "Trust me, I'm a doctor."
Yeah.
so I've found a manufacturer of cocktail glasses or whatever, highball glasses, and I've sent one to Conan, and I've sent one to Nate, and Joel. As soon as you tell me you've defended, it's on its way. Okay. So JD, if you want to join the elite club, trust me, I'm a doctor. Then we have to work out the suitable initiation.
Right.
So, but no, JD, do not sell yourself short. There are far you are far brighter than a lot of people I have encountered. So, to be
That's
honest,
nice of you to say. I
well,
put on a good facade.
well, that's, what? I'll tell you, another thing that military people have a real problem with is the imposter complex.
Yeah.
If they only knew how little I know and how much I'm faking it, they would expose me as the imposter that I am. Well, you're not an imposter, JD. Trust me. I can.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
I will jump on the bandwagon a little bit and just say, man, I really appreciate actually what you're doing, because I mean, I think capturing veteran stories is hard work too. And I think you have to have kind of a particular service-minded mindset to do that, and to really do that well, and to give them, a platform. And I mean, I think it's a real service to the veterans themselves on an individual level. And I think it's a huge service to the community as a whole, and I think, to some of the things, Steve, you were mentioning before too, where, people have trouble transitioning. And I think there's a very difficult mental switch, having talked to quite a few old veterans now, I think a lot of people feel, that switch from being in a purposeful organization to being sort of absent without purpose. And I think to some extent, some people really feel forgotten. I remember talking to quite a few folks and just saying, nobody ever cared to ask me about my story, right? Like I gave it all. I gave everything that I had, and then nobody cared. And so, the fact that you care, right, is a big deal. And I'm sure, people like Mike Humphreys, and you and I have chatted about him before, really appreciate the fact that all of this is happening. I mean, I think it's incredible.
Yeah, I enjoy doing it. I that's the main thing, is to get these stories out. I mean, a lot of these guys are humble, so they feel weird about talking about themselves, and I'm like, man, it's not about us, tooting your horn. It's about sharing your knowledge. I mean, sharing your story. I mean, it's fascinating, it's informative, it's educational. I mean, there's so many things that came out in all these interviews that I've been like, oh my God, I didn't know that, or somebody else can use it, or they have a charitable foundation they're supporting. Yeah, there's so much good stuff that comes out of it that I love doing it. I love doing it.
JD, I will tell you. Obviously, you're on the cusp of a new form, new media for capturing the historical narrative. Joel and Nate and Ethan and we're old school in that we're capturing it on paper,
right?
And that obviously has a value of its own. But when I talk, and I've been talking recently, especially with the TACP Foundation, I think it's important that they know that we are doing our work. But when I talk to people about this, I include you. I use the term the TACP Writers Group, but I also make sure and say that we've got Ethan, we've got Joel, we have Nate, we have me, and we have JD. JD's not capturing it on the written word, but he is capturing it on this brand new media platform known as the podcast. Okay, so brother.
Well, I appreciate you doing that. That's
brother.
Good.
You are right there with us. Ethan may get a lot of plaudits and pundits because somebody can hold up a book and say, yeah, this guy wrote this, and of course I get a lot of comments about danger close. But I know that Nate and Joel they're the next generation coming in doing the same thing, but you are right there with us. Okay.
I appreciate it. I appreciate that.
And I mean it. I mean it from the bottom of my heart.
Well, thanks, Steve. That's nice of you to say. I appreciate it. And if you have anybody out there that is receptive to the idea, send them my way. I'll interview anybody. I mean, I think that there's people out there just waiting for an invite. You know what I mean? And because like I said, our guys are humble. They have humility. They're not looking to toot their own horn, but if I don't know they're out there, I can't invite them, So yeah, if you have any leads at all, please send them my way. I mean, I would love to have him on.
Yeah.
And JD, just to give you sort of, another sort of, not even really quite over the horizon, because Nate has put forward a few of these living legacy volumes.
Oh yeah, those are great.
Yeah, aren't they fabulous?
They're awesome.
And
Yeah, he put out a link, and it's like a questionnaire, and it said, "Hey, do you want a living legacy? Do you want to be interviewed by me? Do you want to be interviewed by JD?" And so a lot of guys have ponied up and said, "Yeah, I want." And that living legacy, man, that is something else. I mean, it's. Have you guys seen those, Joel? Do you know what we're talking about?
Yeah. You sent me a picture of them. Yeah. They look
great. Yeah.
and
It's something else, man. It's cool.
Joel and JD at this, obviously Ramiro is doing a great job making sure that people get a continuing understanding of what the foundation is doing. And so
Right.
at the golf tournament, he took a very appropriate moment to explain what the foundation is doing, and at the end of it, he highlighted these living legacies, in fact, I even jumped in to be the Vanna White. No, not Vanna White. We know he's trying to hold up one of these and show what's in it while he's holding the microphone. So I jumped up and I'm turning the pages, but we illustrated to the entire community that was there what these living legacies are. But the other thing is, and I've talked with Nate about this in detail. We've talked to the foundation leadership. We're really committed to creating more than that. We want an oral history library, an archive, and you're contributing to that. But I think there's sort of an image maybe of some of these are the superstars of the TACP community, but I'm following the Army's model. The Army's been doing this for decades. They went even way back to World War I, where I don't care how insignificant you think you were. Your story's important. We're going to capture it, and it's
I feel the same way.
Yeah.
archived among the probably millions of Army oral history interviews, but certainly the TACP oral history archive will include thousands, and some of them. In fact, I've already done one. Oh, I didn't really do much. Well, tell me about it. I want to hear about it.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, even if they didn't go to combat, even if they didn't, they're funny, they're interesting, they're historic. They're like, man, I came in the 80s and this is what we did back then. It's like, man, that's so different than what people are used to now.
yeah,
It's just, I think it's cool, man. Everybody's got stories. Everybody's got something that they find humorous or interesting. I mean, I think it's cool, man. I've had a bunch of dudes on that, didn't charge a machine gun nest or like Brandy wasn't up on the dam killing, but the episode was fun. I mean, it was a fun episode,
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll sit down with anybody for sure.
Yeah.
well, what? Go ahead.
I was just going to jump in and say, and I don't know what I could nerd out on all of this stuff for quite some time. I think just you're talking my language here, doing oral histories too, right? So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real historical value to that, right? In terms of a good research method, and I think especially when you're talking about, the sort of the commonality of experiences between different people, right? I think when you capture with a really, really, really wide net, as opposed to just looking for targeted individuals, right? When you do targeted individuals, you get a very specific picture of the way that things were, right? And that can be helpful in some circumstances, but it doesn't necessarily allow you to really identify broad sort of community type themes. And it doesn't actually really uplift sort of the full face of your entire people group, right? And so when you cast with a broad net, instead, what it really allows you to do is draw a whole lot more linkages, and identify on a lot more solid ground what sort of the day-to-day sort of sensations, feelings, values, those types of things were for the entire group, as opposed to just very, very, very specific people.
Definitely,
Yeah.
100%.
So it's good. It's great that you're casting with WineNet.
That's why I love hearing about like everybody's tech school experience, you know, and because we all had to do that, and or survival school or whatever what are the things we've all done, you know, like jerk 206 pallets or whatever it is. But I want to hear everybody. If I had the time or if I could just do this full time, I would interview a guy every day.
Oh yeah,
I'd be like, hey, I want every TACP guy that's still around, and you know, I don't know. I think it's important.
That's our goal. And I will tell you, you know, and Joel's exactly right. You know, obviously we're going to get the Marty Klukases and you know, the Mitch Monroes and those guys. But one of the interviews I did for this oral history project was a guy who basically started out saying, well, I didn't really do much, and I got an Article 15, and well, you know what? It was a beautiful illustration of the pre 9/11 TACP world, because the Article 15 he got was for a story all too familiar with anybody who was in the pre 9/11 TACP world. You know, an officer who had a bad attitude to begin with, just really zeroed in on him for, and of course I'm hearing one side of the story, but still it's a story all too familiar. And, you know, that has value in itself. I mean, I want our young guys, and I want the next generation of TACPs to know about the wilderness that we lived in back in the day. And the challenges of it. And yet, and again, here I come back to the Vietnam era, you know, guys who very easily could have said, you know, hey man, not my job, and walked away, but they didn't. And they became, like I said, the grandfathers of the current TACP community. And it's just, God love them. Thank God they did, you know?
Yeah.
No, I just had a quick question as just a final thing out there. A lot of times when I'm describing my dissertation work, a huge element that I'm looking at is the class and culture dynamic, and there's a lot of inherent tension if you're looking at Vietnam generation between officers and enlisted guys. So that's an aspect that I really try and highlight a lot in the work that I'm doing, and I really try and carry that forward, right? I mean, I think there's a broad impact to that as a community as a whole, but I just want to make sure. I made a comment earlier about, like, you know, and these guys are not, you know, the, you know, elite of the elite when I'm talking about, you know, the dudes in Vietnam, because I mean, like, they were just a patchwork solution. And I just want to make sure my comment didn't come across like I have high respect for all of our enlisted community, right? And actually a huge part of my own project is for them. And so it's not, I just don't want to come across like a total.
No, I didn't take it that way. I took it as you meant it. Like these guys were not trained to be special forces operators, and that's kind of why I kind of glommed onto it with my Humphrey story, where he's like, he's just some radio maintenance guy. They're like, all right, now go out in the woods and find these guys. And oh, by the way, there's Viet Cong everywhere. You know, they did these normal guys did these amazing things. That's the way I took it. I didn't take it the other way.
Especially, and Joel, I think specifically mentioned an example of this. The guy who gets his draft notice and says, well, I don't want to get drafted. I'm going to volunteer, but I don't want to go to Vietnam. So I'm going to volunteer in what sounds like the safest and farthest away from danger career field. And then, you're going to be a ROMAD.
Yeah, totally.
All right, gents.